What do you do when things go wrong? When the wheels fall off? Or when life feels confusing? Some people go for long walks. Some people like to talk it out. Some people go fishing. Personally, I like all of those ideas. In the New Testament, there's a person called Peter. Peter is a big character. He is loud, he's brash, he's the center of most parties. He is that person who speaks first and thinks second, if he ever thinks at all. I guess we all know somebody a little bit like Peter. Towards the end of John's Gospel, we read of the arrest, the trial, and the crucifixion of Jesus. And it is a dark moment. It is a dark hour. And Jesus knew it was going to happen. Jesus saw it coming. The night before he was arrested with his disciples and Peter, he was in an upper room and he told them what was going to happen. He saw it coming and he said, "You're going to run, you're going to flee, you're going to scatter." And Peter, who speaks loudly, says, "No, no, no, I'll never do that." His words echo in this upper room, almost as if he's saying, they may do that, but I will never do that. Have you ever said that there's something that you would never do, only to find yourself at a later time in life doing the thing that you said you would never do? I know some people that have said they would never be like their parents when they're older, only to become a carbon copy of them in later life. Well, Peter does the thing that he said that he would never do, the thing that he said so loudly, so publicly, that he would never do. So Jesus is arrested, and just as he said it would happen, his disciples flee. Peter, however, stays nearby and he follows. In Luke's Gospel, we read that there's a courtyard and Jesus was kept overnight in a cell, and Peter sneaks in behind the soldiers and he follows them into the courtyard. And he's there to see what's going to happen next. He's close by, he's in, and the cell which Jesus is held in is also nearby. It's dark, it's cold, the night's going on. There's a fire. Peter warms himself by the fire in the courtyard. And as he warms himself, somebody recognizes him and says, "Wait a minute, aren't you one of Jesus' followers? Aren't you one of his disciples?" And Peter denies it. He says, "No." And he stays there some more and warms himself some more. And they say a second time, "No, wait a minute, you must be. I can hear it in your accent. You are one of Jesus' followers." And again, he says, I'm not. You must have me confused with somebody else." And then there's a third time. And the person more persistently says, "No, you are. I know you are. I've seen you around." And the third time, Peter, even more enthusiastically, says, "I am not." And it's that moment that you will deny me 3 times that you even know me. And in Luke's Gospel, it says that Jesus glanced, and we're guessing out of the window of this cell that he's being held in, and he sees across the courtyard and he catches Peter's eye. And there is this moment of realization where Peter realizes the thing he said he would never do. He's done. Peter bolts. He wept bitterly. He leaves carrying the betrayal, the shame, the guilt, the utter disappointment. And this only intensifies within him as the next day Jesus is put to death. Peter's last words in Jesus' presence were him denying he ever knew him. Some friend he was. For Peter, this is irrevocable. For Jesus is no more. Now, those familiar with the Jesus story will know that this is not the end of the story. God raised Jesus from the dead. Now, I know for some, this miracle seems a stretch too far. Lots of people believe in Jesus, the evidence for the historical Jesus, it was a real person that actually lived. But this miracle, this is a big one. But the disciples believed it. They believed that they had seen Jesus, that he had risen and that he was alive. And they believed it so much that many of them were persecuted to such a point that they lost their lives over it. I wonder how many of them would have continued to believe that with those consequences if it was in fact made up. Returning to Peter. Peter sees Jesus after he is risen from the dead. We read in John's Gospel that most of the disciples were together, doors locked, gripped with fear, not knowing what was going to happen next. Jesus appears in the room. It's amazing, truly awesome, yet set in a context of fear and uncertainty. He appears, shows himself, and then he disappears. What next? And what next for Peter? How does Jesus feel towards him? Peter is still carrying his betrayal. We read in the next passage Peter's response. We can't hide away in upper rooms forever. I am going fishing. It's another dark, long night. Peter catches nothing. Staying up all night on a boat, probably getting cold and wet and catching no fish. Have you ever stayed up late and then watched as the sun rose and a new day begins? The last all-nighter for Peter was probably the night he denied Jesus. The night he stood warming himself by a fire and denying he ever knew Jesus. And then Jesus turns up. In John's Gospel, in John 21, it says Jesus appeared, he was on the shore. He was present, but he was not obvious. They didn't know that it was Jesus at first. It says that he was standing there. So Jesus appears on the shore and he calls out to Peter, who's in the boat, who's been fishing all night, who hasn't caught anything. And Jesus asks an annoying question. It's annoying if you're a fisherman and you haven't caught anything. And the question is, have you caught any fish? The answer is no. Jesus then gives advice. He says, hey, why don't you try putting the net on the other side of the boat? Now let's just pause for a moment. This is really strange advice. Firstly, Peter is an experienced fisherman. Before he was a disciple of Jesus, he was a fisherman by trade. That's what he did. He knows these waters, he knows what he's doing, but yet he's getting advice from a stranger on the shore. And there's some comedy in the advice. Throw your net on the other side of the boat. If you are in a boat and you're floating in the water, then the water that was on your right-hand side a few seconds ago would have been on your left-hand side because the boat's drifting and moving. So the advice, hey, why don't you throw the net on the right-hand side of the boat, is really strange, comical advice. However, Peter says, okay, and he does. And he throws the net on the other side of the boat and he catches big, so many fish, that there is this moment, this realization that is not meant to happen. There's something going on here. And then there's this memory, this throwback memory of a previous event. A few years earlier, when Peter was fishing, before he had met Jesus, he had this experience, this encounter where Jesus turned up, connected with him. Again, he's out in a boat. And again, Jesus said, hey, why don't you put the nets over there? And they did, and they caught so many fish. And when that happened, Peter came to Jesus and met Jesus in a way that absolutely changed his life, changed it completely. And Jesus said, what you've just seen, what you've just done with fish, that's going to be a picture of what you're going to do with the rest of your life. But this time it's not going to be about fish, it's going to be about people. It's going to be about taking people from where they are to where they could be in relationship with God. That's what you're going to do. So this moment today on this shore is reminiscent of that moment, of who Peter was and who Peter is destined to be. It's all being restored. It's all being brought back together. Peter has realized who's on the shore. He's realized it's Jesus. And Peter responds in true Peter fashion. It's about 100 yards from the shore, which for an average swimmer is about 2 minutes. I wonder what was going through Peter's mind as he swam. What will it be like when it's just Jesus and me, perhaps? Will he be angry? What will I say? He's got about 2 minutes to think about this. Peter arrives on the shore, wet and cold. Peter and Jesus catch eye contact. Jesus looked at him in the eye. It's reminiscent of the glance across the courtyard and the night when Peter denied that he knew Jesus. There's a fire burning. Peter's cold and wet from his swim. He warms himself by the fire, which is reminiscent of the fire in the courtyard on the night when he denied Jesus. Jesus' first words to Peter, come and have breakfast. It's a warm invitation. Eating together was a key element in their culture. It spoke of unity and sealed a bond. Many sacred occasions happened around a meal. It's reminiscent of the meal they ate together on the night that Peter betrayed Jesus. Fire, food, and the way Jesus looked at Peter. It says in the text he didn't need to ask who it was. He knew. There is a powerful act of restoration occurring. Everything is being restored. I wonder if you put yourself in Peter's shoes or in his seat or in his cold, wet clothes. I wonder what your response might have been on that morning. I guess we all have done things and said things that we wish we hadn't done in that way or said like that. And if only we could swallow those words back or go back in time and change that occasion. And unfortunately in life we can't do that. That isn't possible. However, Jesus doesn't take us back. He doesn't change the past, he redeems it. He doesn't remind us of everything that we've ever said or done wrong. If he did, we might be there sometime. Instead, he restores it, and he restores us. Restoration is good.